OCD makes me ask tormenting what-if questions every day. My earliest memories with OCD were pretty young. Honestly, some of my first memories have to do with OCD and questions and what my parents called worries. I used to call my parents into my room at night when I was trying to go to sleep as a really, really young kid and tell them all of the things that I was concerned about, all of the things that I was worried about. But particularly, even as a 6, 7, and 8-year-old, I would tell them that I was worried I was a bad person, that I was worried, what if I hurt somebody? What if I did something bad? What if I killed somebody? And it was really baffling to them because I was so small and I was this kid who was getting the citizenship awards at school and was helping everybody, that I would come home and say, well, what if I'm awful? What if I'm secretly a bad person and just don't know about it? Around that time, around the age of 8, I lost my aunt to cancer, and that was really my first experience with loss. And I thought it was my fault. And I had just gone on a road trip with my Aunt June, and I remembered sitting behind her in the car, and she had cancer and a number of medical devices with her that I do not remember what they were from such a young age. But I remember thinking, well, what if I accidentally kicked one of them? And then shortly after that, she passed away, and I thought it was my fault. I thought maybe I kicked one of those medical devices in the car, and she didn't really die because of her cancer. She died because of me. That was the first time I started to get really obsessed with death and with traumatic incidents being my fault. OCD ramped up in different ways throughout my life. And from really that early age, I was trying to push things down and cover things up. A lot of elementary school, it was perfectionism. My teachers used to call my parents in to school because I wouldn't go out to recess because I was erasing stray lines on my paper. Wanted everything to be perfect, wanted to make sure everybody was safe. I can also really remember things ramping up when even learning about the solar system in science for the first time, and being afraid that the sun would get too close to the earth and everyone would die, and that I had to stop it because it would be my fault. So just all of these things that I was taking a lot of responsibility for continued to ramp up through middle school and high school, where checking obsessions became pretty prominent for me. Checking flat irons, checking the oven, checking the stove, checking locks, feeling like I needed to keep everybody safe. A lot of what I was experiencing in this over responsibility and this really moral scrupulosity, along with these checking components, I was covering up through really unhealthy attachments and through abusive and unhealthy relationships, because I didn't value myself at that point, and existing in those relationships in some ways numbed the things that I was experiencing with my OCD and the way that I was feeling about myself, feeling like I was responsible for the world. By the time I got to college, things were really starting to get worse, but I was incredibly high functioning, which I later found out was not necessarily the best for me in terms of getting treatment. I could look like I was doing really well and just be internally crumbling and internally hate myself. And it was starting to take way more time than I'd ever had before. Ended up getting a full scholarship to grad school at Emory. And when I got there, the checking just became so pervasive in my life. Again, completely covering it up. It got to the point where I was driving back at 2 a.m. To places that I was interning, and to churches, to make sure that the doors were locked and that the stoves were off and that the tea makers were unplugged, driving back to my seminary to make sure candles were blown out, and just getting completely stuck. And at this point knew that what I was experiencing was OCD. I was taking enough psych classes to know that because I had some of those classic checking symptoms, but had a mentor explain to me that if I was to seek treatment, or if it came back in my psych evals, I probably wouldn't get ordained. So I covered it up. I lied on all my psych evaluations. I didn't get help, and I continued to get sicker until everything exploded in my first ministry. Earliest symptoms, I remember at age 8. I wasn't officially diagnosed until my mid-20s. I had an idea, again, that I had OCD, but really didn't get that diagnosis until around the age of 25. Went through my first round of ERP, was very actually fortunate to have an amazing therapist because I really kind of self-diagnosed with OCD, learned about ERP, connected with a fantastic person in my area. But even for me, I think I went through the treatment really quickly the first time around and thought like, oh, I'm never gonna have any worries or obsessions ever again. And I really didn't fully embrace the uncertainty that was necessary as a part of ERP. So in the midst of trauma and loss, I experienced a pretty major relapse, and really 2 years later, around the age of 27, was able to go back to treatment and really learn the significance of these exposure and response prevention tools. I think OCD is something that we always navigate. We have it forever, it's a part of us, but I don't think it has to impact our lives in that same way. I think we can live big, beautiful, awesome, full, joyful lives with OCD, but it doesn't mean that my OCD doesn't pop up. It doesn't mean that it doesn't bother me. I try to ignore it, but sometimes it's tougher than other times to really like stick with the ick and sit with all of it. And some of the biggest what ifs I still navigate have to do with moral scrupulosity. Am I a bad person? Am I an immoral person? What if everybody secretly hates me? What if I'm secretly a sociopath? What if I am just pretending to be this nice moral minister? What if I'm harmful in some way to my clients now that I'm working in faith and mental health? What if I wasn't worthy of getting a divorce from a past toxic marriage? What if because I've made mistakes in my life, because I've gone through a divorce, I don't deserve to be happy with the fiance that I love and care about so much? What if I don't deserve joy? I want folks to know that you can get better and that OCD doesn't have to drive in your life. Also that you don't have to have shame around OCD. I think for me, for so long, I kept the fact that I had OCD a secret as a minister, as a school chaplain, as someone who thought, well, because I'm in a religious role, no one will respect me if I have OCD. What will they think of me? And I want folks to know that you can be authentically you. You can do all of the things that you want to do and have a mental health diagnosis and seek treatment. And as we navigate OCD, there are not a whole lot of things that we're certain about. But one thing that I always am certain about is the fact that if you continue to do what you're doing, if you continue to engage in compulsions, you will, in fact, get sicker. You will, in fact, move towards your OCD. And I did that for a really long time, even when I was functioning very highly. But by leaning in, by having this radical faith, by trusting the research, you have a chance, right? You have a chance to get better. And regardless of what your OCD says, you deserve to live this big, awesome, amazing, beautiful life, and you are worthy of all things that bring you joy. I want folks to know that you can, in fact, live into your faith tradition or live into anything that's valuable for you, and also seek evidence-based treatment, that those things aren't mutually exclusive. But rather, I've learned that by seeking evidence-based treatments like exposure and response prevention, you can more fully live into the life that the divine has created for you and the person that you were created to be. Hope is everything in the conversation around OCD. Like, it's all about hope. We talk often with OCD about values. I'm a runner, and I like to say that I run towards my values each and every day. Some people paint towards their values, some people skip or leap or jump or dance. But that's what it's all about. It's about the hope of being able to do the things that are meaningful to you. And not even just do those things mindlessly, but actually do those things and be present for those things. So I think, sometimes it's hard to ask someone to engage in treatments like exposure and response prevention that feel really tricky without this sense of hope that you can get to a place in your life where you can actually live. So I think for me, hope is knowing that you can be at a place where you can engage in everything that's meaningful to you in a present, meaningful, joyful way. And I'll often ask clients, what is the thing that's the most important to you? And can you imagine being in that place, doing that thing in a really present way? And in that moment where you get to choose between doing a compulsion or not doing a compulsion, do you want to step towards that moment, or do you want to step towards your OCD? And to me, hope is knowing that we have a choice. OCD doesn't have a choice. We don't have a choice about having OCD, but we have a choice about how we respond. And hope is knowing that every time we fight our OCD, we get to take a step closer to every single thing in our life that's meaningful to us. Research is really, really important because OCD is all about uncertainty, right? So we talk consistently about the fact that we don't have certainty about everything. Even folks without OCD don't have certainty about anything. We just don't. And OCD treatment really, I think, from a ministerial perspective and just beyond, is about radical faith. But sometimes in addition to that radical faith, right, we need a little something to hold on to. And I think research, evidence-based treatments and research give us something tangible to move towards so that we can lean into all of these other areas of uncertainty so that we can have radical faith. I think the more that we work on research, the more that we have tangible things that can happen, whether that has to do with medications, whether that has to do with evidence-based therapies, the more we can actually lean in to something tangible and have radical faith that by leaning into that treatment, we can in fact get better. We can in fact get back to those people that we were created to be. And I also think the research component is so important for continuing to break down stigma. OCD is so misunderstood in so many different ways, but by continuing to research, we can continue to not only let folks know that OCD is in fact a debilitating condition, but that there is hope to get better and to live these beautiful, awesome, faithful lives that we were created to live. Because of my OCD, my brain loves to throw scary what-if questions at me each day. But what if you're not alone? And what if research brings hope?